What's the problem between Chris Paul and Scott Foster? Paul appeared to remark, "He's talking about my son," following the ejection. Foster also revealed to a pool reporter during the game that Paul received his first tech for unsportsmanlike conduct. Foster stated that Paul continued to complain and received a second unsportsmanlike technical foul before the second tech was called. On Wednesday night at Footprint Center, Chris Paul and referee Scott Foster got into another altercation. Paul spoke with referee Foster in the last second of the first half of the Warriors game against the Phoenix Suns, and as a result, received a technical foul. Foster, however, saw right through him and handed him another technical penalty before ejecting him from the game. Together, they have a lengthy and notorious history on the court. In playoff games officiated by Foster, Paul's club had a record of 3-17, which includes a 13-game losing streak. It's evident that the rivalry has reached a boiling point after the Warriors guard was dismissed on Wednesday night, but the future is unclear as the cause of the antipathy. When Scott Foster dismissed Chris Paul during the Suns' first-half victory over the Warriors on Wednesday, the long-running, highly publicized rivalry between the two players took a dramatic turn. A few observations on one of the most peculiar rivalries in sports history between players and referees. Nobody is quite sure whence this hostility started. We do know that when Foster officiates a game, Paul's team always loses. A great deal. Veteran NBA reporter Tom Haberstraw noted that with Foster's officiating, Paul's teams were favorites in a 15 out of 20 postseason games. In those contests, they went 3-17 and lost by an average of 11.2 points. Whoa. The NBA will claim that none of it's related to Foster's officiating. He's regarded as one of the best referees in the league on a regular basis. Only the best referees are assigned to officiate the NBA Finals, and Foster officiates his 16th one last June. Foster officiates the 2021 final games between Paul's Suns. More than any of the other 12 referees assigned to the series, Foster had officiated 23 finals games before this year's finals, according to the press release from the NBA. The most recent altercation rapidly got out of hand after Foster called Paul for a foul in the first half. The exchange between Foster and Paul has been attempted via transcribed by social media lip readers, but it's unclear exactly what precipitated the first tech. Paul appeared to say, "He's talking about my son," following the ejection. Foster also revealed to a pool reporter during the game that Paul received his first tech for an unsportsmanlike conduct. Foster stated that Paul continued to complain and received a second unsportsmanlike technical foul before the second tech was called. Foster may be blamed easily. Attending an NBA game is not the purpose of the officials. Furthermore, there's an argument to be made that the referee should have moved to another location to end the exchange when Paul approached Foster to dispute. Furthermore, he could have used the second whistle more wisely. What Paul said to cause the first technical is unknown to us. Referees are strongly discouraged from verbatim quoting coaches or players in pool reports. We do know that Paul and Foster argued for a considerable amount of time, which is usually enough to result in a technical for any player. Foster also seemed to give two enough looks before whistling Paul for the technician. It's impossible to place blame without knowing information about what Paul stated. How come they would? Foster is regarded as one of the NBA's best officials. Paul and Foster met years ago, but there was no punishment. Nor is there any reason to think that this incident will most of all, this is a PR fight. Paul is winning, too. The general public believes that Foster is an excessively strict referee, and Paul is a victim of that. It's obvious that the future Hall of Famer no longer wants Foster to officiate his games. If Foster does, he has put the NBA in a difficult situation. If you ask an NBA fan whose individual rivalries have shaped the league in the 21st century, a few names immediately spring to mind. Russell Westbrook versus Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant versus Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James versus Steph Curry, and so on. Though it may go unnoticed, the rivalry between Warrior players Chris Paul and Scott Foster is just as significant to the history of contemporary basketball. Until the Suns defeated the Clippers in Game 2 of the first-round series on April 18th of this year, teams featuring Paul had a 13-game losing streak in the postseason. Foster served as a referee for these games, and the future Hall of Famer played for those teams. Paul became quite irritated at Foster on Wednesday night. Shortly before halftime, Paul expressed his disapproval of the senior official, and Foster quickly ejected him from Golden State's match versus Phoenix. According to the Suns broadcast, Paul called Foster a bitch. Foster was so incensed by what Paul said that he sent Paul to the showers and called Warriors coach Steve Kerr for a technical penalty. Paul finished the game with 2 rebounds, 6 assists, and 6 points. Paul appeared to be infuriated by Foster's judgment and remained agitated toward him. Foster promptly gave Paul a second technical, which resulted in his inevitable removal from the game. Steve Kerr, the head coach of Golden State, was clearly upset with the ruling and got a technical foul of his own, and his team lost to the Suns 123-115. It's personal, Paul stated at the news conference held after the game. A personal situation occurred a few years ago. Everyone knows, even the league, and there has been a meeting and such. Well, there's a situation with my son. Foster and Paul have a lengthy history that goes back to the Stars' days as a LA Clippers player. The two were also part of a situation that happened when Paul was with the Suns, Oklahoma City Thunder, and Houston Rockets. Paul stated it was a whole thing, in a reference to Foster. However, it has persisted for some time. Right now, this is what it is. Following the game, Steve Kerr and Steph Curry of Golden State defended Paul's conduct and expressed surprise at the NBA veteran's ejection from the contest. At Footprint Center, Chris Paul and referee Scott Foster got into another altercation. Paul was assessed with a technical foul in the final seconds of the first half of the Warriors game against the Phoenix Suns for talking to Foster about his feelings. He nevertheless persisted in interacting with the referee, which resulted in another technical violation and his removal from the match. The already notorious history between Paul and Foster on the basketball floor is further enhanced by the occurrence. NBA players and fans discussed Paul's early departure from the game on social media. Paul played just 17 minutes in his debut game at Phoenix after being dealt to the Warriors. Even though he scored 6 points and dished out 6 assists, he was forced to leave the game early, adding another chapter to the continuing battle between Paul and Foster. The league as a whole is well aware of the long-standing antagonism between the player and the official, as Chris noted. Whether the NBA will investigate and take any action is still to be seen. Unquestionably, one of the most fierce, entertaining, and engaging long-term rivalries in NBA history is the one that still exists between Paul and Foster. However, little is known about the nature of Paul's problem with Foster. The former NBA player Gilbert Arenas revealed that he thinks is the main problem between the two veterans in a recent episode of the podcast, Gil's Arena. Paul has already stated that his hatred is directed towards his kid, and Arenas tells a tale of what might have set off the two of them's chilly dynamic. It's unlikely that Paul and Foster will resolve their differences anytime soon. Thus, it will be interesting to watch if the NBA decides to keep Foster and Paul apart, or if Foster is assigned to officiate any more of Paul's games this season. Paul even hinted that there might have been a problem with his kid and Foster. Paul said that the league intervened a few years ago and called a meeting with Foster, Paul, referee executives, and former Clippers coach Doc Rivers to put an end to the animosity, though he did not elaborate. Apparently, it was unsuccessful. Naturally, there's a bit of catch-22 here. If the NBA forbids Foster from participating in Paul's games, it would be considered an acknowledgement that Foster lacks the ability to referee fairly when Paul is present. Foster's antics are evident in Wednesday night's altercation, which was shown nationally on television. The NBA does not want a referee to take center stage in a narrative following the Tim Donaghy debacle. That's all for today. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to receive notifications. Also, express your valuable thoughts in the comment section below. Until then, bye. Also, spend some time watching other videos on the channel.